I'm going to put back into the chat the offer practice. Okay, and then I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so back in business, here's where we were. We were talking about this lovely listing in Cedarburg that we wanted to write an offer on. And these are who our buyers are going to be. John and Jane Doe. It's the same people I use all the time. They signed buyer agency with us on June 21st, which makes them a client. So that's going to be important to know for the first line of the offer. You'll see that in a second. They want everything that's included except the piano. Apparently they're putting in a piano, which is great, but we don't want it. They can close on or after August 1st. The offer price that they're willing to give is $545, which is the list price. So this isn't necessarily competitive offer practice. They have 2% earnest money ready to go. They want a home inspection. They don't need radon. They're going to have the appraisal contingency, and they're going to put 12% down for financing with Cream City. So what I'm going to do, oh, and they want the well water and mound system tested. So what I'm going to do, why can't I? Okay. This is the property in question, 1621 Summit. Okay, can you guys see it okay? Okay, so a little bit about this house, just to quickly go through MLS. It's 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, 2-car garage. It was built after 1978, so why is that important?
Lead paint.
Lead paint, yeah. So there's not going to be an addendum S for lead paint. Some other things to take note. It's in the town of Cedarburg, not like the city. So you'll see why that's going to be important in a second. And then it's not on municipal water or sewer. So they have their own well and they have their own sanitary system. So that's why the buyers want to have that stuff tested as part of the offer. So when I look at like private remarks, like why I want to do that is there might be some information that the seller or the listing agent is including about closing date preferences, or if like the title company might be holding earnest money. But for this purpose today, it looks like they've just used private remarks to indicate when some of the updates to the home were made. So that's nice. And this wasn't. So I look to see like, what is this seller paying? They're 3% buyer's agent. So if you have a buyer agency and you say like your fee is 2.4%, you would probably amend your buyer agency agreement 3%. So you make sure you get the full commission. Because 3%, I haven't seen that. Okay. So when we look at the documents that are included, there's nothing. So what's really missing here is a condition report. And what I would do is ask the listing agent, hey, can you please send me a PDF of the seller's condition report? Because you're going to want your buyers to review it. They will need to sign it as part of the offer. And we'll also have to put the date that the condition report was filled in on the offer. Okay. So I'm just going to quickly go down one more thing. So here were all of the inclusions that they offered: piano, appliances, all landscaping, light fixtures, and window treatment. I don't like that they were so generic about appliances. Like, you need to be very specific with that. So what I did was I looked at, they also included more specifics here. So I'm just going to get into zip forms. So this isn't zip forms training, but I'm just going to get right into it. So new. So this is a new offer to purchase. And usually how I do this is I put in the address and the buyer's name. So for our purposes today, 1621 Summit Drive, and I'm going to put Doe But then for my own thing, I'm just going to put test. You don't have to put the property address in here, but what you do need to distinguish is if it's a residential home or a condo or vacant land. So we've got a residential house. And this is make sure when you select the templates that you select the right one, because whatever template you select here is going to automatically populate the right documents you will need for your offer. So this is a offer for a residential home. So here we go, residential offer packet. And I'm going to hit save. So here we go. So what I like to do is just follow the gray bars. So the first thing I'm going to do is, hold on, why is this doing this? Okay. I'm going to add my contact information here. So you are the selling agent. You are the agent that's bringing the buyer. So in the party section, what you need to make sure is anybody that's going to have to sign documents, well, that's not good. Anytime somebody has to sign a document, they need to be listed as a party in the transaction. I forgot to hit save. There we go. So over here on the left-hand side are the people that you can add to the transaction. So we only have to add the buyers. So I'm going to do John Doe. I can't type today. And I would put their email here. Okay. But I'm not putting an email here. But you have to put in an email if you're going to send it through DocuSign for electronic signature. Otherwise, it doesn't know what email to send it to. So now I'm going to add buyer 2, and that's Jane Doe, and I would put her email here. Save. So this is all the people that you need in your transaction in terms of parties. You don't have to have the listing agent in there. You don't have to have the lender. You don't have to have a title company. You just need your buyers and yourself. So then I'm going to click over here and I'm going to go to documents. So this is all of the templates and zip forms that you could use to put together your offer. So we already know that they signed the buyer agency agreement. So this one's kind of a moot point, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right into the big one. This is the big old offer document. Okay. So now I'm going to use some of that information that we had in the Google Doc, that PDF, and I'm just going to start plugging away. So we're going to pretend that we're writing the offer today. And knowing that they signed buyer agency with us, what do I have to do with lines 1 and 2? What am I striking out and what am I keeping?
Striking agent of seller and agent of buyer and seller.
Yep, because if they have buyer agency with you, they are an agent of the buyer. So I'm going to go over here, hit strike through. There we go. Okay. Next up, it automatically populated with their names because we had added them as parties to the transaction. But here's where we put the address, 1621 Summit Drive. And it's in the blank of blank. So this is where you would put like the city of Milwaukee or the town of Pewaukee. And again, if we quickly go back to MLS, how do we know if it's in like a town, a city, or a village? It'll tell you in MLS. So this is in a town. So I'm going to put in the town of Cedarburg, county of, we don't know what county it's in. It's also back in MLS. Oops, up top. County Ozaukee. Okay. And for our tests today or for our practice, we're going to give the seller what they were asking for in terms of price. So that was $545,000. So all you have to do for the purchase price is put in the numbers in line 10, and it'll then automatically populate the words that correspond to that dollar amount. Next up, we have to put in the inclusion. So what's included in the offer? So let's go back again just to MLS to see what they put in the inclusion. And they said and apply landscape fixtures and window treatments. Okay, again, I don't like the fact that they just said appliances. I want specifics. So we went up here and we saw, okay, all of these things are included. I'm going to quickly just go back and reference what our buyers wanted. And this is what they wanted. I already kind of edited it. So I took out the piano because they said they didn't want it. So I'm just going to copy and paste. Easy. So not included in the purchase price. This is going to be a default in your zip forms. It should always show seller's personal property. It also is kind of reiterated here. But we know too that our buyers, they don't want the piano. No one wants that. So I'm just going to add piano.
Are we always putting just what the buyers want in inclusions and kind of skipping what the sellers have listed?
Correct. Because if differs, if your buyer, all of that, fine. Your buyers even want more. Maybe there was a microwave that was excluded. You can always put it in there.
Okay.
But yeah, you only put what your clients really want in the inclusions and what you want to make sure that is not left behind in the exclusions.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is just a definition of what all of those types of like fixtures would be. So things that would automatically come with the house. But the next thing we want to fill out here is the binding acceptance. So today's the 26th. Usually if you call the listing agent and tell them, hey, I'm interested and our buyers are going to submit an offer. Do you have a preference in terms of binding acceptance? Like, do you need 24 hours, 48 hours? The listing agent should tell you the preference if it's not already put in MLS in the private remarks. So let's say we called this listing agent. Who's the listing agent? Anthony. And he said, you know what, we need 48 hours. So we're going to put June 28th for our binding acceptance. This transaction is to be closed on. If I go back to kind of what the buyer was hoping to do, they were ready to go anytime on or after August 1st. So what date is August 1st? Hold on. What day of week? That's a Thursday. Great. You never can close on a weekend. So you just need to make sure. So let's put August 1st. And then this usually, the buyer and the lender usually have the opportunity to select where they want to close. So that's going to be automatically put into your zip form. But what you want to make sure is you just cross this out because it reiterates, or here we say it's going to be at the place selected by the buyer, but then it also says at the place selected by the seller. So just cross that out. Then we go to the second page and we have to make sure, and it never works, but you have to make sure that your address carries through on the top of every page of the offer. And it didn't. So, and that's okay. We just put it in here and then voila, it's there. And then I'm just going to do a quick double check and it's then put it on the top of page 3. Okay, so I'm back here. So the first section that we need to fill in here on page 2 is earnest money. So we know that our folks are ready to pay 2% in earnest money. So 2% of 545,000 is $10,900. And it's going to either be mailed, commercially, electronically sent, or personally delivered within blank days after acceptance. So what we want to be careful of, if these guys approve and accept our offer on like Friday, all the deadlines go into effect starting Friday. So we lose the weekend if somebody wanted to drop it off in person. So what I would usually I try to do earnest money within like a shorter amount of time than 5 days, but because we're going into a weekend, I'll just put 5 days. And And we don't have any special instructions about the earnest money. So usually the listing firm is the one that holds the money. If there is special instructions, like a title company is holding it, it should be in private remarks. Or if you're unsure who's holding the earnest money, just call the listing agent and ask them to confirm. So again, this isn't like contract, so I'm into specifics about the language in here, but just make sure you is always familiarizing yourself reading the contracts. Mission report. So we didn't get one, was neat, but let's just pretend that we did get one and the seller filled it out on June 15th. So we have to indicate that the buyer actually did receive one. So again, we're just going to do a pretend like they gave us one and it was dated June 15th. And just because you're putting something here, this indicates the seller has provided a condition report to the buyer. The buyer doesn't have to agree with what's on the condition report. The buyer is just acknowledging that a condition report has been provided. So all of this here on page 3 is just examples of some of the things that the seller should be disclosing on that condition report. So there's nothing here for us to modify or edit. But here at the top of page 4, we're in business here. So that's good. Our address has followed through to the next page. And the first section on page 4 is the home inspection. So we know that our buyers want to get a home inspection, which is great. And we're going to check this box in line 193. So this indicates that the offer is contingent upon a registered home inspector performing the home inspection. If there were any other things that the buyer wanted specifically inspected, like right out of the gate, for example, maybe the roof looked fishy or the basement looked fishy, you can also add that right away to your offer, and you would put the specifics here, like roof company. Or if it had, maybe you noticed already a chimney issue, you put like chimney company. But just note too that the buyer is allowed to have any follow-up recommendation or recommended inspections if the home inspector has indicated such. So say the home inspector comes in and says, you know what, the chimney looks a little off. The buyer has the right to have a follow-up inspection performed by a chimney company. So that's automatically a given. So we need to put a deadline in here in terms of when this contingency is going to be due or when everything needs to be buttoned up. And the blank boilerplate is 15 days. And one thing to keep in mind about this inspection deadline is this doesn't mean when the home inspection has to take place by. This means in this many days, we have to have the home inspection. We have to have any follow-up inspections. If we have to get estimates on repair or work, all of that is taking place during this time period, as are negotiations with the other party if there needs to be repairs or repair or past credit. All of that has to take place in the name. So typically the home inspection is the time frame that the most people nervous, right? So if I'm a seller, I don't want this to be terribly long because I want to know sooner versus later what's going to happen. If I'm a buyer, in order to make my offer more attractive with a home inspection, I'm going to try to schedule and make this a shorter time frame. But just remember, when you do a shorter time frame, it's not just the inspection that has to take place, it's the inspection and any other follow-up inspections, estimates, negotiations, etc. So let's say for our offer today, we know that our buyers want a home inspection. We're just going to do our darndest and we're going to try to get everything done in 10 days. Now, in terms of who has the right to cure, Our buyers are giving the seller the right to cure. And in this type of market, a competitive market and a seller's market, it is more attractive for the seller to have that right to cure. So I'm going to cross that off. And then if the seller has the right to cure, the seller can satisfy the contingency by either delivering written notice to the buyer within blank days. After a buyer has delivered notice of defects, the seller will say, okay, I'm going to cure the defects. Or the seller may satisfy the contingency by actually curing the defects. Or they can satisfy the contingency by delivering to the buyer a written report detailing the work that's going to get done no later than 3 days prior to closing. So usually for this deadline here, we've been talking to the other party. There shouldn't be any surprises when we send through a notice of defect if we can't come to an agreement and make an agreement official about how things are going to be cured. And you make that official by creating an amendment. But say that seller's like, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I don't give the seller 10 days to figure out what they're going to do. Because I've been talking to that other party consistently throughout the inspection period, there aren't going to be any surprises as to what I'm going to deliver. I'm going to put that for like 2 days. Now, offer is null and void if the buyer makes a timely deliver of the notice and the seller doesn't have the right to cure, but that's not in our case. Or the seller decides, you know what, we're not going to cure it. And that kills the deal. Now, our buyers have indicated they don't want a radon test. So if I don't want to make this section part of the offer, what should I put in box 227?
Nothing.
No, you put NA, Ben, not applicable.
Oh,
And you'll see why that's important. I'll specify why that's important in financing. But a lot of people leave it blank, but just it's best practice to put not applicable, just so it's crystal clear as to this is not included in the offer. So on the top of page 5, because we aren't having a radon test, this top section we don't have to fill out because that's still pertaining to the radon test. Okay. Now we're getting to finance. Yes, we're having a loan. Okay. What kind of loan are we getting? We're going to get a 30-year conventional loan. So you type in the type of loan here. So this offer is contingent upon the buyer being able to obtain a written 30-year conventional loan. If they were getting a 15-year loan, if they were getting an FHA loan or a VA loan or an adjustable rate mortgage, you would specify what type of loan they're getting in this line. Now, we want to deliver a loan commitment in blank amount of days after the accepted offer. So this line here in line 250, this is the number of days in terms of our financing deadline. So typically financing, and again, pick up the phone and call your lender to say, hey, when can I deliver loan commitment? How fast are you guys working? Because the faster you can provide it, the more attractive your offer becomes. So let's say a typical loan commitment can be delivered between 14 to 28 days. So let's just, for our practice today, we'll just do 21 days. And that financing selected shall be in an amount of not less than blank for a term of not less than blank years, amortized not less than 30 years. Okay, so what do we put here in this amount line? So the financing selected shall be in an amount of not less than blank. This line here, this box on 251, that is the amount that the loan your buyer is going to be asking for. So how do we calculate that? We go into our handy dandy mortgage calculator on our phone. And Rebecca, you might not have one uploaded yet, but we like Carl's mortgage calculator. And we can talk about that later. But our property value is the asking price, so it's $545,000. We know from our buyer cheat sheet that they are gonna put down 12%. So that means their down payment amount of 12% is $65,400. So back to this number here. The number that we put in here is the number that the loan is going to be for. So it's going to be the purchase price minus the down payment. If anybody's doing this at home, can somebody tell me what number goes in here then? What's the principal? What's the loan amount? Okay, I'll tell you.
How
It's
much were
for,
they putting down? Sorry.
they're putting down 12. So the property, we're offering 545. The down payment of 12% is 65,400. So we subtract the down payment from the sales price and we get a loan amount of 479,600. So again, this is just what the loan is going to be for. Now it's going to be for a term of 30 years because we know we're getting a 30-year mortgage. So we're going to put over 30 years and it's going to be amortized over 30 years. Now, if you're getting a 15-year mortgage, this number here would be 15 and this number here would be 15. Initial monthly payments of principal and interest shall not exceed blank. In this line here, this is where we put the buyer's monthly mortgage amount. So it's just going to be the loan, the principal plus the interest that they owe. It does not include taxes. It does not include homeowners insurance. It does not include any of that. And it's stated specifically here. Initial monthly payments of principal and interest shall not exceed X amount of dollars. Buyer acknowledges that the lender required monthly payments may also include 1/12 of the estimated net annual real estate tax, hazard insurance, PMI, etc. So a lot of times buyers, when you're reviewing this section with them, they say, oh my gosh, my monthly payment is so much less than what I was estimating. And that's because it doesn't include the amount of taxes that you're going to escrow. It's not going to include the amount of homeowners insurance. So this is just the loan amount. And for our amount today, we know that we are putting 12% down, and in our cheat sheet, the interest rate was 7.25%. So that translates into a monthly payment of $3,271.2. Again, this is just the principal and interest. Is everyone following? I'm assuming yes. Okay. Now, the buyer is not buying discount points, or they're not buying points to bring down their interest rate. So this just stays zero, blank. I can't even put zero in there. And the next piece we need to talk about and include in here is the annual interest rate that these buyers are going to be aiming for. So because we're getting a 30-year conventional loan, that's a fixed rate, meaning it's going to be the same interest rate across the duration of the 30 years. So I'm going to check the box. And in our buyer cheat sheet again, we said that the interest rate is 7.25. If you aren't quite sure where interest rates are at, call the list or call the lender and ask them, what interest rate should I put in the offer to purchase? Because interest rates can vary like week to week, day to day. If you were getting, if your buyer was getting an ARM or an adjustable rate mortgage, you would check this box here. But again, ours is a fixed rate, so we're keeping it as is. The next section that we would have to fill out is seller financing. And this is if the seller was actually going to help the buyer get the loan. And they're not in this case. So what do we put here? Ben?
Nothing or not applicable.
NA, cool. Okay, on to page 6. If this was a cash offer and that whole financing section we didn't have to fill out, wasn't part of the offer, but it was cash, this is where we would indicate when we would be giving the seller a proof of funds for our cash offer. And it's preferred that a proof of funds gets delivered at the same time as the offer. So similar to a pre-approval letter. So never leave this blank. Put like 1 day if you have proof of funds to provide at that time. Okay, moving down. We are going to be getting an appraisal, but we also are going to include an appraisal contingency in the offer, which means the buyer is going to have the property appraised, and that comes at the buyer's expense. If the appraisal, the value for the property is equal to or greater than the purchase price, that's great. Nothing needs to happen. We are happy as a clam, which means the appraiser said that the house is worth at least the amount of money that we are offering the seller. So that's great. But what happens if the appraiser says, you know what, I know you're offering 45,000, but the house is only worth 530. The appraisal contingency allows your buyer to go back to the seller and try to negotiate a reduction in price to match that appraised value. So for our practice today, we don't have any appraisal gap. Like this is as basic as it gets. So we've got the appraisal contingency. Typically, your appraisal contingency follows a similar number of days in terms of a deadline as the financing contingency. Sometimes it can be a few days before financing. So we were indicating financing was due in 21 days. We'll just make the appraisal contingency the same, 20 days. Now, we're also giving the seller the right to cure, meaning if the house doesn't appraise, we're going to go back to the seller and try to negotiate. And we're going to give the seller maybe 2 days to decide what they're going to do, if they're going to reduce the price or if the deal is dead. So the offer is null and void if the buyer sends a notice. Say the seller says, you know what, we're not going to drop the price to 530. And if the buyer really can't make up the difference in cash to cover the gap, the buyer is going to send a notice to the seller indicating that they've objected to the appraised value. And the seller said, no, I'm not going to change the price. So then the deal is pretty much dead because it's going to be a hard thing for the buyer to get financing if the appraised value is lower than what the offer price was.
In line 317 there with the 2 days, is that typical that you give them about 2 days to figure out if they want to reduce the price?
I mean, you could give them one. Again, similar to like the home inspection, you should be in contact with the other agent, so there shouldn't be any surprises. So say the appraisal comes in at low, like in our example, 580,000. You as the buyer's agent is going to get your buyer's permission to do the appraisal report to the agent. Do that if the appraisal comes in low. You never send the appraiser report to the seller or to the listing agent if the value comes in at your asking price or higher. They don't need to know that. But they do need to know that this came in low. Here's the appraiser's report. We are asking that you reduce the price to match 530. You can do it. You don't deliver a notice unless you're really getting into those negotiations and it sounds like the seller is not going to do it. So what happens is if the appraisal comes in low and the buyer delivers the appraisal report and says, hey, can we please negotiate this? It came in low. We'd like you to reduce the price. Say the seller's like, yeah, that's fine. You would actually change the price officially using an amendment, which is signed by both parties. But again, say during discussions, if it sounds like your seller is not going to reduce the price, then really and your buyer can't make up the difference. The only thing that the buyer can do at this point is deliver a notice indicating we're objecting to the appraisal price and we're giving the seller notice that we're officially asking them to drop the price. And if they don't, then the deal's pretty much done. Line 328, or this section, is if the buyer has to sell their current home in order to buy their home. This is like a whole contingency. For our practice today, this doesn't include, this not applicable to us. After the bump clause, which is usually part of a home sale contingency, the bump clause would be checked here if that was in fact necessary, but it's not applicable for us today. And then last on this page, if the seller had accepted another offer, but they were willing to accept secondary offers or kind of like backup offers, we would be checking this box here. You would know if you were writing an offer to be put into secondary position. The listing agent would tell you. But for our purposes today, we're in it to win it, and we want to be the first offer that they accept. So we're going to put not applicable. Moving down into page 7, closing prorations. So this is where the title company will work to determine how various costs need to be allocated between the two parties. And the biggest one is really taxes. So, the seller's living in the house from January 1st through July 31st, if our closing date is August 1st. So the seller is responsible for holding money aside and giving money to the buyer at closing for taxes relating to that time period with which they're living there. Then the buyer is responsible for putting money aside from the date of closing, August 1st through December 31st. So that's what like prorations are. And again, the title company will help calculate that. But we need to tell the title company how should they calculate these prorations. If it's an old home or if it's not a new build, 9.5 times out of 10, we check this box here, meaning that we're going to use the taxes from the preceding year as kind of our benchmark or our base. So the title company will take a look at what were the taxes in 2023, and they'll come up with a daily rate, and then they'll prorate that based on how many days the seller's living in the house and then how many days the buyer's living in the house. Hope that makes sense. But you don't ever have to help calculate it, but what you need to do is tell them what type of calculations or what's the information that they're going to use to calculate those prorations. Then in the title, there's usually anything for buyer to amend or change in the section, but this is just a section that you should make sure your buyers understand, and that is the seller's responsible for getting title insurance between now and when things close. The seller is responsible for turning over a title that doesn't have any legal judgments on it, any liens, anything bad. So make sure you familiarize yourself with this section and that you actually walk your buyers through that section too. Moving into page 8, if this was a leased property or like an investment property, maybe it was like a 2-family, and if there were any renters in it, that needs to be included here. Then these are all things you don't need to worry about in terms of fixing or adjusting, but just something to point out to your buyers. It's really up to the seller to make sure that the house is in the same condition that the buyer saw it in at the time of when the offer was written. So other than normal wear and tear, like the property needs to be kept in the same condition. Now, if there's any damage to the property between acceptance and closing, If the property is damaged in amount not more than 5% of the purchase price, the seller needs to notify the buyer, hey, the dishwasher gave out. Don't worry, I fixed it or I replaced it, and I replaced it with something that is materially the same condition as what you saw it in before. But if something is more than 5% of the purchase price, like a tree falls through the house after a storm, the seller has to notify the buyer, hey, this happened. And the buyer can, in fact, determine whether or not they want to get out of the offer. Something to keep in mind. Buyer has the opportunity within 3 days prior to close. They can have a final walkthrough, and that needs to be at a day and time approved by both parties. And then I'm just going to go down here to the bottom. If you had any additional information that was really pertinent to the offer that you wanted to clarify or get more specific on, like say, for example, this was a cash offer, I might put in these blank lines like, this is a cash offer, proof of funds from Baird accompanies this offer. This is where you would put in those specifics. But otherwise, your template or your default should automatically indicate that if any deadlines fall on a Saturday, Sunday, federal state holiday, that deadline's extended to the next business day. The only time it doesn't matter if it's on a Saturday or Sunday is binding acceptance. Binding acceptance can happen 365 days a year. So we're going to go down here, and how is this information, how will these offers and these documents get delivered? Usually people fill in the in-person, and then we'll fill in email. So if you're filling this in, the seller's recipient, that would be the listing agent. It's not actually the seller's name. So I'm going to put Anthony D. Polston here. And then I'm going to put my name as the buyer, because between Anthony and I, we're going to deliver the documents to each other. If you were sending them via fax, I don't know why you would check that box. You would never really check commercial delivery or mail because that's just sketchy. So usually 99.9% of the time you're sending documents via email. And here for the seller's email address, you put the listing agent's email address. And you can get all of this from MLS. And then for the buyer's email, you put yourself. And then we will have additional documents that are made part of this offer. And usually we have to make sure we check the box. Usually it's the condition report. It's addendum A. And if we had a lead-based paint thing, we'd include that here, but we don't. And here's where we put your name and your brokerage because you are the one that drafted the offer. And then on the last page, you just want to make sure that your buyers' names have been put into this section here. And then that's it. The rest is filled out by the listing agent. So I know that's super fast. And we're not going to really get to addendum A, which would be used to sound system tested. But that's the other document that we would be filling out for this offer. Anybody have any questions? I know it's very fast.
I was actually wondering, I'm running into this situation right now where potential client, their parents may have to co-sign because he just left his job and got a new job. Does that change with the financing at all?
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. Yeah. So here, this actually is kind of similar to a situation that I just had. So I got buyers that got an accepted offer, and that both Mr. and Mrs. Buyer had applied for a loan. Mrs. Buyer got a raise, which was great because then it could help them afford a new house. But as the lender was going through and doing their due diligence, they noticed that Mr. Buyer a long time ago was delinquent on paying HOA monthly fees. So the lender figured out, hey, I can actually get you a better rate if we just put Mrs. Buyer on the loan. We didn't have to change the offer. The offer still has Mr. and Mrs. Buyer's name, but Mrs. Buyer's the only one with the loan. So what you would need to make sure is if your buyers are getting support from other people to help make the loan possible, ask the lender just to confirm who is all going to be on the loan, what names are going to be on the loan, and what names need to be put on the offer. I think you would only have to really put your buyers' names on the offer, like parents wouldn't have to be on there as well. But you also don't want to make it terribly confusing to the listing agent, because if their pre-approval has like 4 names on it, then you might have to put 4 names on the offer.
Sorry, you said put whose names? Ask lender to confirm who will be on the loan.
Who's going to be on the loan and how they want the offer to be written as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to do more offer practice tomorrow in PC.
Okay.
But I know that this goes by like super fast. So if you guys have any questions, no, but the more you can attend these things and you know, oh, Ben, what do you got?
Yeah, I just think not really questions, but I do think it'd be helpful. Obviously we're running out of time, but then also to go through like how to compress them and how to get them over to DocuSign, just the repetition of that as well. I know it's only a couple minutes and it's probably second nature to you, but what buttons to press, how to
Yep.
save it correctly, things like that.
So that's in command and zip form training, and they actually have that tomorrow.
Well, it's easier for me, Kim, if you tell me. So,
Well, I can also point you to other old videos that should be showing you that too. But yeah, I agree. It's zip
yeah.
forms and DocuSign is so clunky. I hate it. But it is what we have to use. And once you do understand how to combine things, it's pretty easy, but it's clunky at first. So I'll make sure I'll tell Lindsay tomorrow or for her training tomorrow too, just to make sure she covers that. So then even if you can't attend tomorrow, we record it and we'll upload it again to YouTube.
So I do have a question. I don't have access to MLS yet, so I'm probably not going to be able to do the homework.
That's fine.
Is that right? Yeah, is that
Yep,
okay?
that's
Okay.
okay. Yep, that's okay. And tomorrow for PC, I'll have printouts of blank offer documents. So if people want to handwrite things, that's fine. I'll
Okay.
also have printouts of the MLS data sheet for the house that we're going to write an offer on. So we got you covered.
Perfect. Cool.
Yep.
Cool.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Keep
Thank
it
you,
real,
Kim. See you tomorrow.
everybody. Real awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.